Join me in welcoming Geraldine.
Thank you guys for showing up tonight. I know the weather is terrible and there are a lot of things going on. Like Emily Nussbaum is upstairs and she won a Pulitzer. But I have an entire chapter dedicated to poop, so I feel like we're on even footing. And Val Kilmer is in town, so I almost blew this off to go there. But then I found out people were coming. So thank you. This is amazing. I wanted to start by reading a couple passages from my book. Which I see a lot of familiar faces in here, which is amazing. A lot of you are in the book, which is probably stranger for you than it is for me. For me, it was kind of like a delightful little thing that I got to do. And unfortunately, there were stories that were cut, so more of you were in the rough draft than made it to the final end. And that's a very difficult thing, to leave your friends on the cutting room floor. So it's kind of interesting to frame this book because it's not a true travel memoir, as so many publishers told me. And there was one agent who I spoke to who said, you know, it seems like the book is just really stories about how great your husband is. And I was like, yeah, it is. So she didn't get her 15%. So it's a rather interesting narrative in that respect, in that it doesn't truly cover travel. And one of the sections that I wanted to read to you actually illustrates, as soon as I find it, I'm trying to do this smoothly, like, oh, I'm just looking through the book. I have no idea where my marker is. But one of the things that I wanted to read to you kind of illustrates how it's not exactly about travel. It's kind of the journey that we all take to find ourselves, as I told one publisher who shockingly bought it. So hey, like that worked. And so, oh my gosh, you guys, I seriously can't find my here it is. Okay, good, great. So to give you some context for this bit that I wanted to read to you, it is, I'm so sorry, Mom. It's about you. And it's about the balance that we have with our relationships, and how there really is kind of an equal and opposite force in our life that the people who we're in a relationship bring. And how my husband really helped me find balance in my life, and miraculously, I helped him find balance in his. So, with my apologies to my mother. As you may have gathered by now, I am not a calm person. If I ever look distracted, it's because I'm planning out an escape route in case whatever building I am in spontaneously combusts, or I'm looking for something to cling to in the likely event that gravity suddenly reverses itself. At times, I am neither rational nor logical because fear and anxiety have taken over. It's as if my brain is a frightened, angry baboon. You cannot get the baboon to relax because it will lunge for your jugular. You do not tell it to calm down because baboons do not tend to understand English. Instead, you give it a snack, and if you have enough presence of mind, you lace the snack with THC. And then you carefully back away. Stoned baboon is the best we can hope for. I'm a neurotic worrier. I obsess about things, I hold grudges. I'm basically Larry David if he were raised by Don Corleone from The Godfather. Just when I think I'm out, I need to run back inside and make sure I didn't leave the iron on. If I married someone like me, our tombstone, after years of nervous, panicked marriage, would read, "Did you remember to pay the electric bill?" Fortunately, Rand is different. He shrugs things off, and he's perfectly happy smiling brightly at unpleasantness. He forgives and loves and rarely worries. He's almost reckless in his desire to not stress the details in his personal life. That said, when it comes to work, he's almost as crazy as I am. We all have our weaknesses. His is a software startup. I can count on 2 hands the number of times I've seen him actually lose it. It tends to be when freaking out is entirely called for, but I'm unable to muster the reserves of energy required to do it because after 3 decades of being entirely unhinged, I need a nap. The first time it happened was the year my mother came over for Easter dinner, and I was exhausted from having spent the day cleaning and cooking and having imaginary preemptive fights with my family. By the time Mom opened up her purse and said, "You will not believe what I found," and then pulled out a perfectly spherical World War I era grenade, which she was holding up by the pin, I could only stare blankly at it. "Huh," I said. This was one of the rare moments when Rand took over the noble role of screaming at my mother. "Yolanda, what the hell? Put that down!" "What? It's just a grenade. It doesn't work anymore," she said assuredly. She held it upside down to reveal a hole in the bottom, presumably where the explosives went. And to her credit, they did appear to be gone. After all, Mom's not completely irresponsible. If she brings a grenade into your home, it probably won't be live. "Oh, it doesn't work," I said calmly. "You don't know that. None of us know that," Rand shouted, which was a fair point. I started dicing some shallots for a salad. "We need to get rid of it," he said. Mom's reaction was, unsurprisingly, not in accordance with this. "No," she whined. "Why do we need to throw it out?" "Because it is a grenade." "I'll keep it then." My husband, having learned that the process of fighting with my mother is roughly as effective as screaming at the ocean to be less watery, acquiesced. His compromise. She could keep the grenade, but not in the house. Rand gingerly took it from her, demanded her car keys, and walked cautiously out the front door. "Don't throw it out," Mom called after him. "I am putting it in the trunk of your car before anyone else gets here," he yelled back while taking small, metered steps away from us. My mother pouted. She had been excited about the grenade because it was visually similar to an Easter egg, she explained, and had decided that it would therefore be a perfect gift on a day when we were celebrating the resurrection of Christ. I nodded. It was all rather sweet if you didn't think about it too much. Rand came back a few minutes later, short of breath and clutching his heart, a move he learned from me. My mother began to defend her actions. Rand cut her off. "Yolanda, no, just thank you. It's very sweet, but no. No grenades." "I'm sorry," he said, and then excused himself to go upstairs for a few moments, presumably to weep. "What's wrong with Rand?" Mom asked. I shrugged. He has a weird thing about grenades or something. So my mom has read this book. That's why I apologize profusely. But one of the things that she said, and I can't do her accent, by the way, no one can, but she said, "Nothing you said was untrue, but I don't appreciate how I was characterized." And I do feel that is fair. But none of it is untrue, and that is all you need to know to get around libel laws. So, she said that she was going to be in disguise so no one would identify her, but the thing that I don't think she's realized is that also means she can't speak. Because once she talks, you'll know who she is, so this is going to be an interesting evening. So the next piece that I wanted to read to you was a bit more travel related. It's about when I went to France. And I know a lot of you, so a lot of you probably know I had brain surgery a few years back. As a caveat, I was like this before. So, but I realized that the experience of having brain surgery and also just so many experiences in my life were not what I had expected them to be. You know, we kind of have these schemas of thought in which we place things, and nothing ever works out like that. It's kind of an obvious lesson, but it's one that I feel like I'm constantly learning all the time. And so this is a little bit about how Paris was not what I expected it to be, but also my life wasn't exactly how I expected it to be, and I was not how I thought I would be a year after my brain surgery. I'd heard from various other travelers, movies, and cartoons that Paris itself was a sort of chaotic nightmare, an overpriced tourist trap wrapped in a cliché, and that Parisians are universally horrible to everyone, but they reserve a special bit of loathing for Americans. I was sufficiently petrified of this, and so I'd spent the last few months studying French, an endeavor at which I exhibited a level of such profound incompetence that even my seasoned tutor seemed taken aback. I nevertheless managed to keep a few important phrases in my head, which I will share now, at no additional cost to you. French for the wretched, Lesson 1. Je voudrais des macarons, s'il vous plaît. I would like some macarons, please. J'ai chlamydia. I have chlamydia. In what will be both a defense and criticism of my French instructor, I will note that she only taught me the first phrase. I had to look up the second one on my own. For the record, I do not actually have chlamydia, despite what the captain of a rival high school debate team told everyone in the 12th grade after we made out that one time. I want to pause right now, actually. So this is true. It was not chlamydia. It was actually syphilis. We made out, and he told everyone that I had syphilis. My French phrase book, for some reason, had the phrase, I have hepatitis in it. I didn't want to use either hepatitis or syphilis because you can actually die from those. So I changed it in the book to chlamydia. This is a little Easter egg that you guys get. And part of the reason is that, one, you can't die from chlamydia. Two, is for some reason real funny to me, the word. And three, the French word for chlamydia is chlamydia, which is great because they really don't want to have a problem with translation. Like, I appreciate that. They're like, no, I want to make sure you get what I am telling you. So kudos to the French there. Also, FYI, I looked up this gentleman who told everyone that I had syphilis. I wish I had done it before the book was out. He runs a PR company in Seattle. So, yeah, so kudos to him, Peter. So anyway, I imagined vivid scenarios in which falsely professing to have an STD might get me out of trouble in France. I would thwart pickpockets and mimes and an overly flirtatious Sarkozy by screaming it loudly, confusing them long enough for me to make my mistake. I also had a bunch of commonly used niceties in my wheelhouse, like s'il vous plaît and merci beaucoup and désolé, which means I'm sorry, as in désolé, monsieur. J'ai chlamydia. But reality, once again, did not align with my expectations. I found none of what I had feared, and no occasion to scream about STDs under the Arc de Triomphe. Instead, Paris would make good on every other promise made by the Art Nouveau movement and films starring Audrey Hepburn. There were broad streets lined with trees, down which elegantly dressed men and women strolled. There were red-painted lips and well-tailored suits, blooming flowers, ornate wrought iron fences, and metro signs designed by Hector Guimard. If you listened hard enough, you'd swear you could hear accordion music playing. Walking down the Champs-Élysées one warm afternoon, we actually did. Hold on, I'm still reading. So I ended up kind of making sense of France and of my surgery. It sounds a little cliche at the Louvre. It's not as poetic as it sounds. I actually liken it to, I think I call it a lawless sex dungeon. Is that what I call it? No, sorry, drunken sex carnival. So there's a distinct delineation there. I breathed deeply. I needed to get out of there as soon as possible. I unfurled the map and decided I'd simply visit the works highlighted in the museum pamphlet. It's probably the exact opposite of what Rick Steves would have done, but as I noted before, he wears pleated front pants across Europe, thus nullifying his opinion. The first item on my agenda was, of course, the Mona Lisa. After a 20-minute trek, I turned a corner and found myself in the right gallery. At the end of it was the Mona Lisa, surrounded by a crowd of at least 30 people. I squeezed through, remembering the years I spent navigating concert crowds in my 20s. There was a brief, fleeting moment in my life when I may have been cool, and finally made it to the front. There she was, smiling at me with her naked brow and odd little grin. And there I was, utterly confused as to what the big deal was. Other than a cautionary tale for why you should leave facial hair removal in the hands of a professional, I didn't understand. She didn't move me to tears, reminding me of my own lonely and defiant years like Degas' Little Dancer aged 14, or leave me elated and speechless like Seurat's The Models. See, I'm cultured, y'all. She didn't even give me a hint to why she was smiling. Instead, I found myself disappointed with one of the most famous paintings in the world. And once again, there I was weirdly comforted by it. Because if Leonardo da Vinci disappoints you, there's a good chance that you have unreasonable expectations of everything, including yourself. By the time Rand found me back at the hotel, I was lying on our bed, eating macarons, and humming what I thought was the French national anthem, but what may have actually been the theme to the A-Team. Guess which tune will remain stuck in your head for the rest of the day? How was the Louvre? He asked. Ugh, a madhouse. I spent half an hour looking for the painting of two naked chicks where one is pinching the other one's nipple. I should explain. After I found the Mona Lisa, I'd circled the Louvre for a good part of the afternoon, looking for the works mentioned in the museum map. One painting included therein, Gabrielle d'Estrées and one of her sisters, artist unknown, features the eponymous Gabrielle sitting naked in a bath with her sister, because apparently that's what French aristocracy did in the 1500s. And while they look rather prim and proper for two grown women sharing a tub, the sister is reaching over and pinching Gabby's nipple. Supposedly a nod to her fertility, as Gabrielle was pregnant with Henry IV's son. I bet Thanksgiving, if it had existed at the time, would have been crazy at their house. Rand laughed. I lay on the bed eating macarons that I had ordered from a pastisserie with such pitiful determination that the woman behind the counter gave me a free one, thereby forever cementing this valuable lesson. Ineptitude pays. I nibbled on the spoils of my pathetic effort as I relayed the afternoon to Rand. He smiled, arms crossed against a desk, listening to every word. Do you want some steak frites? He asked when I'd finished my rant. Yes, 1,000 times yes. I'd have shouted this reply had my mouth not been full of salted caramel meringue. But I didn't need to verbalize it. Rand knew the answer anyway. In a world where nothing is constant and nothing lasts, it's nice to know that some things are etched in stone. Time or brain surgery or jet lag cannot alter them. I would always get lost, and I would always make it back. Sometimes I'd have to lose a sweater or a piece of luggage or a part of my skull, but I would make it back. Maybe I had changed, and maybe it didn't matter. Woo. should we go to the chalking so I don't have to be here alone? I'm afraid the longer I hold the stage by myself, the greater the chance of me making a fool of myself. It's already starting. So I wanted to introduce the moderator and the person who will be interviewing me, and this brings me a ton of pleasure because not only is she an award-winning Seattle journalist whose byline you may recognize, and who has written about the community and the art scene and just what it means to be in Seattle. But I have also known her since I was 14. So I am delighted to introduce my friend and very accomplished journalist, Deanna Duff.
Well, thank you for that. It's so wonderful to hear it in your own voice and the voices of other people that you do, which we'll talk about that in a little bit.
I'm so sorry, Mom.
We're all going to be looking for Mom tonight, by the way. There's a prize, I think, for whoever can identify.
It should not be. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? Yeah, it's on. Okay. It should not be too hard to tell which one's mine.
So the book published on Tuesday, I'm sure many of us ran out and read it right away.
Yeah.
But
If you haven't, there's copies here.
and buy multiples, please.
Yeah.
I love this book because I think it's so many things to different people. Some people will read it, it will be travel that grabs them or family. For me, it was this grand love story between you and your husband. And I'm really curious, the readings kind of showed that, these different elements. How do you describe it to people?
I remember when you first actually said this to me, I was like, what? That's weird. That's weird. I mean, I think of it as kind of a manifesto that I've written to make other people feel better about the mistakes in their own lives. So I think with a lot of memoirs, and I think with a lot of travel writing, people are doing things in a very competent way. And that is not my personal narrative. And I think in particular with travel writing, there is this is the best thing that you should do. Here's how you should optimize your time. Here's how you shouldn't offend the locals. Here's how you shouldn't get robbed. Here's what not to do. Avoid the touristy spots. And it's like the barrier to success is very high. And I get swindled in Seattle. So for me, I felt like I needed to debunk that. And what better way, really, than the person on Earth who is least qualified to travel to tell her story about travel. So that I think that's what I was trying to do. I think I was trying to kind of confront that idea that you need to know what you are doing in order to write a travel book.
Which is so great. It's so human. And that actually is something I wanted to ask you about because the travel blog, I have to say, when we met in high school, you had just moved from Florida.
You said you weren't going to talk about high school.
I didn't make any promises.
Right.
You seemed so adept at adapting even at that age and finding your space and sense of self. So
Really?
I was really surprised to read the book and find that travel was uncomfortable for you initially. And I'm kind of wondering about that arc of why it was first uncomfortable, and that arc of how you came to embrace it. Basically, so all the rest of us worried about losing our luggage have some hope.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was uncomfortable. I think I didn't realize it was uncomfortable, actually. So I'm a relatively anxious person. I have 2 therapists. One who specifically deals with anxiety. So I feel anxious and to a degree of discomfort, at home. And I think that when I was first on the road, I was like, oh, yeah, no, this is the same as at home. I'm just uncomfortable all the time. But then I started to realize like it was distinctly worse. And I couldn't put my finger on why. And I think it was just that idea that if I screw up, something disastrous will happen. And I think the thing that made me feel better is that I kept screwing up and did not die. And that to me, I was like, which it sounds crazy, but actually, if you talk to an anxiety therapist, I'm going to save you all a ton of money right now. If you talk to an anxiety therapist, one of the things they will say is, well, what are you nervous about? Like, let's play this out to the worst scenario. And the worst scenario is death. And you haven't died. So what are you worried about? Because you're like clearly the things that you are worried about are beyond your control. So I think in that weird way, I kept screwing up on the road and survived it. So I guess that was how I got over the discomfort, sort of, because I still have it.
And do you think that writing about it helped? Was a good outlet?
Oh yeah, no, it's a great way to exercise your demons. Absolutely. There have been so many experiences that have happened on the road where I'm like, this is terrible, this is the worst, I'm so angry. Oh, it's gonna make a great blog post. And there were a few experiences that happened that I was like, oh no, this is really, really bad. I'm saving this for the book. So it does help put your life in great relief. Like, okay, this now makes sense because I get to tell people about it.
Just to give people an idea of how much you travel, how many days per year, how many countries do you think you've visited now?
Oh, I actually don't think, compared to, like, I have friends who are completely nomadic, and I have a few friends here who are travel writers as well. So I feel like this is the question I avoid because then people will find out I'm not on the road that much. I think we're on the road about a third of the year. So like 100 to 110 days a year. Rand's actually more. And we have been to, like, I think we did the count, not quite 30 countries together, like 25. The very, very handsome man with the very, very tall hair in the front row is my husband, by the way. So that's the person I keep making googly eyes at. What's up? What's up, babe? What's up? But yeah, I think around 27 or 25. I'm really bad at this, huh? I keep like talking to my husband and doing weird asides. Oh, I can't believe I got a book deal.
I think we all can believe that you got a book deal. There's no question. And next will be stand-up comedy. The great thing about this is I think most of us just inherently think of travel as external. Mm-hmm. I went and visited this site, the Eiffel Tower. Whereas for you, you traveled and learned from it internally about yourself and your family.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Did it surprise you? Did you look for that?
No, like I said, I have no sense of direction, so looking for things is very bad for me. So that was a bad joke. That happened, though. These are the jokes. No, I didn't. I don't think it was my intention at all, but I did. I guess I did start to realize as I traveled that my family was very international. And it's strange that it didn't occur to me, but for me, my identity was like, I am an American, right? I was born here, I was raised here. But my mom came over when she was pregnant with me. And so there were all of these things that I associated. Like my mother is, I'm gonna say this, and Mom, you can quote me on this. Like my mother's not crazy at all. My mother is Italian, like 100%. And I thought, like she can't stand in line, like she walks into traffic, like what is going on? If you go to Rome, people walk into traffic, like that is how you cross the street. So that was really illuminating. And I think, I went to, like I didn't, before we started traveling, and I think it's safe to say I did not know my father well. I mean, I kind of knew him, but like I really, going back to Germany again and again, like I learned who he was. So it was rather unexpected, and I would say, I wrote the book, and it wasn't until my editor actually said, she goes, this is really unusual because most people travel to find themselves, and you traveled to find your family. And she's like, so you left home to find the people closest to you. And I was like, that did not occur to me. That sounds ridiculous, but I was following my husband on his work trips. I wasn't expecting to get to know, my half brother who's English and sounds like John Lennon. I mean, his accent's amazing. I didn't think I would get to know him better, and I didn't think I would. No, none of this was intentional. My life is a happy accident.
Something that almost made me tear up reading it was how initially, when you're a little more fearful of being lost, Rand would say to you, "I'm only ever a car ride away," which is just so sweet and romantic.
Yeah.
And you should hire him out. That would be
That's
I'm-
actually
I'm-
I've tried. Craigslist took down my ads. Apparently, that's illegal.
Well done. And it got me thinking, for you, it seems like home is more a sense of internal emotion than it is an actual location. You can take home with you. Is that
Oh yeah.
true?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I pack up my emotional baggage, and I pack up home, and I do take them all with me. And I think part of that is, I still have, my father just passed away. I was going to read a section of the book about him, and I was like, nope, can't do it. But the idea of having a very, very long flight and being, thousands of miles away, and you're like, oh, nope, that's familiar, you are my parent. And so having that, or, going to my aunt and uncle's house, they live, 3 hours outside of Rome, which actually at that point you're not 3 hours outside of Rome, you're just somewhere else. But going to their house, and they have a framed photo of me on the wall. So it very much changed the concept of where I was comfortable a lot, yeah. And I think that part of that is having a family that's very spread out.
The writing is brilliant, and it's funny. And did you always see yourself becoming a writer? When did this happen? Because I know the travel blog was kind of something multiple people encouraged you to do that you didn't even see yet.
No, I was pretty adamantly against it. I think I always wanted to. I always wanted to write. I mean, we were English nerds together. You remember, and so it was fun, but. I thought that the only way that could translate into a viable career was to be a journalism major, and then go to journalism school. And I found that experience really, really disillusioning, illusionizing. Anyway, not what I thought it would be. And I distinctly remember what happened. I wrote an article about laughing clubs, which were, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but there are these clubs where people laugh, not at things, but they laugh as a way of making themselves feel better, so at nothing. So people would walk up to one another and just start laughing in each other's faces, which sounds like a nightmare. So I was in journalism school, and I wrote this article about it, and the editor, it was published in a local newspaper, but the editor took it and wrote, there was a line, and they just added, timely now, laughter clubs are growing in popularity. And they wrote, perhaps because of the increasing stress in a post-9/11 world, which it was, but I was like, wait, what? And it completely changed the tone of the article, and I had never experienced anything like that. I was 20 something, and I was so bothered by it. So I was like, okay, maybe journalism isn't for me because I'm putting my heart into something and it's changing it. So maybe I need to stop putting my heart into things. So I went to work for corporate America, and that was, and so I kind of forgot it, and it was kind of a departure. So I was pretty adamant. This story is taking, I don't even know where I'm going with it. So no, my husband did make me start the blog because I was freelancing after I was laid off. I didn't know what I was doing. And he was like, start a travel blog. I'm like, no. And he's like, no, please start a travel blog. I'm like, no. And he's like, please stop browsing the free stuff section of Craigslist. And like start a travel blog. I was like, I don't know if I can write about travel every day. He said, what can you write about every day? I was like, you. He's like, that's weird. Start a travel blog. Jokes on him. Jokes on him. Wrote a love story to you. Boom. Yeah. What? Didn't expect that to happen, did you? Yeah. The key to marriage is mockery, you guys.
So this is a good example of how absolutely funny you are. I feel like humor writing is especially difficult to do. And for those
That's
of you...
because you're emotionally well-balanced.
No. If you were reading this book in a public place, at the gym, on the bus, be forewarned, you're going to laugh like crazy. People are going to think you're having an episode. It's that funny. And I've asked you this before. Do you see yourself as funny? Do you know you're funny?
No. So here's the thing. Rand knows this. Like, I approach humor very clinically, which sounds terrible, but like, if I'm watching something that's funny, half of the time, like, I'm not laughing. I'm just like, okay, why? Like, why is that funny? Like, why did what was it about the delivery of that? What was it about the style of that? So I don't know that I think that I am funny, but I do enjoy laughing at things. And I think at some point, if you enjoy laughing at things, you eventually will start to laugh at yourself. Like, that is just a natural progression. So I don't know. I'm surrounded by, I think part of it too is like, I'm surrounded by hilarious people, like just very funny people. And so I think that they've rubbed off on me, but I don't think I'm innately funny, no.
I think we disagree. But
Oh, that's cool.
I kind of wonder, though, because you read the book and you think, wow, funny things happen to Geraldine, right? Life is so boring compared to Geraldine. Life finds you. But then I thought, yeah, but maybe it's because you look at things for the humor, because a lot of these stories in the book could be disaster stories. And you find something of value, which it's a remarkable skill. Do you think that's important to moving through life and travel?
I think it's actually a way of dealing with disasters, right? Like, so I don't know if it's an inherent component, but I think we all laugh at things. I think we all look at things differently, and there's a couple of different paths that you can choose, and at some point you're like, okay, like I could start crying about this, but dude, this is kind of hilarious. Like, come on, like this is funny. So I think it's actually like a coping mechanism, to be perfectly honest. Like, sometimes the situation is so bad where you're like, okay, like this is kind of funny. And I remember there was this one time that Rand and I were in Milan. And I don't know if you've ever driven in Italy. I mean, I feel like Italy specifically, it's its own beast. Don't, if you can avoid it. But we were driving in Milan, and we were young, and we had no experience driving in Europe. And I'm like, babe, you're driving on tracks. Like, there were tracks in the middle of the road. I'm like, I don't think you can be in this lane. I think this lane is designated for some sort of public transportation, which will run us over and kill us. And Rand was like, no, it's fine. I was like, no, we're gonna die. And I turned and I looked, and there was a train like coming towards us. No, it runs on city streets, but we were gonna die. And I kind of told him, babe, we're gonna die. And he just started laughing. And I was like, well, I could start screaming, but like, do I want my final moments to be screaming? Or do I want to laugh? So I just started laughing. And I think that was kind of a turning point where I realized that we're not renting cars in Italy anymore.
We have to talk about the voices. You recorded an audiobook, which we can look
I
forward to that.
did,
We got
yeah.
a wonderful preview here of hearing it. We have to talk about the accents and this
Yeah.
journey that you did recording it.
So recording an audiobook, it's a fascinating experience. So I went to some guy's garage in North Seattle, who I didn't know, who I met on the internet. So my publisher put me in touch with this recording studio, but it was in North Seattle in some dude's garage. But at any rate, you're sitting in this little tiny room, and you're given, you are reading your book for hours alone, and so you've got headsets so you can hear yourself. But if there is anything at all, like I would just have to redo that take. Like I'm trying to think of what I could say. The car is over there. They'd be like, yeah, you need to do that again because there was too hard. So you have to go over and over and over again doing these lines. So it's a crazy and really rigorous process. But when you're reading it, obviously, if you're reading a book, you can tell who said what, and there's quotes to offset speaking voices. But if you're reading a book like aloud, if you're doing the audiobook, you don't have the benefit of saying, and now my mother said, and now Rand said. So you do have to offer different voices. And there's just no way. I mean, my mother has this amazing, like, beautiful accent that's like, I don't know, Ariana Huffington meets Zsa Zsa Gabor. It's great. She's so mad at me. She's never going to speak to me again. But it is fantastic. And I was like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to be like, oh, yeah, honey, I don't think you should do that. Or, oh, I like my grenade. Like, no, like that's not my mother. So I knew that I wasn't going to get it right, but I knew I was going to get it better than someone who didn't know any of these people. So I was pretty adamant that I wanted to record the audiobook. And it becomes a very interesting thing when you're doing an impersonation of all the people that you love. Like when you're doing an impersonation of your husband, and then you have to do your speaking voice, which needs to be distinct from your narrator voice. So it was really fun, but I also realized like how many people in my life are going to be mad at me.
Well, we have your mother. We had a preview of that. What's your second favorite, best accent of the book?
I would say it's the accent that didn't appear in the book, which is Kieran, my friend Kieran. So my friend Kieran, there's people here who know him. Mel and Ashley know Kieran well. I can't do an English accent at all. I can do my Uncle Andy's accent because he's like Cockney, like, "What, honey? What are you doing?" That's it. That's shockingly accurate for those. Like Chrissy knows my Uncle Andy, and she's having a fit. Like that's my uncle. But Kieran's I can't even do it. And he's been living in Australia for a few years, so it was awful. So I'm trying to do Kieran's accent, and it was so bad that I told the audio guy, I'm like, "Can we do it again?" And he goes, "Sure." And I said, "Can I just do an aside?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so I did an aside, and it basically was, I said, "Look, so here's the deal. I tried to do Kieran's accent repeatedly. When I did it for Rand looked at me and said, 'You are the worst person in the world.' When Kieran found out that I had done an accent of him, he said he kept returning to the idea like a pigeon returns to a pile of sick in Leicester Square." So after all of that, I gave up. "Kieran, I made you sound like an American." And that is the most unkind thing you can do to an Englishman. So that is my favorite. That is my favorite accent in the book after my mother's. And I think the third would have to be my dad. And that, I don't think we have too many audio recordings of my dad, which is a shame. But the thing is, my father's accent was he was Russian, but his family made their way across Europe, and he ended up in a displaced persons camp in Germany around World War II. So Dad was living a fun life as a kid. And then he made it to the Lower East Side of New York. So my father spoke sort of like he speaks like my husband's family. He speaks like an East Coast Jew from the Lower East Side, but crankier and kind of monotone. So he'd be like, Geraldine, what the hell are you doing? And it was like that. So it was almost like this Christopher Walken, but like not. And what is both sad and delightful to me is now now that my father has passed away, my brother and I will get into fights about it. My brother's like, what are you doing? That's not him. It was like, Geraldine. I'm like, no, it's not. So we will have these fights, but I don't know. It's fun. It was fun. It was fun to try and do my mom's voice and my dad's, and my apologies for everyone involved.
Well, I think we'd all pay to have you do the voices in our respective heads. What is maybe a story that you love that just there wasn't room in the book, a little Easter egg, another one you can give us?
So one of my favorites, so I drag on Rick Steves a lot in the book. For the record, like I think he's a total mensch. Like he just donated, I think, a $4 million house to battered women in the Seattle area. Like Rick Steves is a phenomenal human being. We have a lot in common in terms of extracurricular interests, like travel. My mother is here.
Munchies.
I don't know what you're talking about. She's a drug counselor. Did you know that about my mom? So I forgot what I was saying. So Rick Steves is a great guy, but I drag on him a lot because he can't like everybody. And so one of the things that happened is it wasn't my first MRI. I think it was my second or third MRI where the doctors were like, yeah, something's wrong, but we're not sure what. Okay, cool. I'm gonna be calm for this one. So I don't know what it was. Like I remember. So when you get brain MRIs, if anyone has had the pleasure, they put your head in like a plastic case. It looks like a bird cage, and it goes around your head, and it's tight, and so you're immobilized. So I had this on, and I was like, I'm calm, and I went to brush something out of my eye, and I hit the cage, and I was just like, I'm not okay, and I lost it. I was just a mess. I just started bawling, and they were like, okay, you need to calm down, and I was like, no, I'm just not okay. They're like, okay, but you have to do this because you have a brain tumor and we need to see what it is, which only made me cry more. So at that point, so they call Rand in, who's like, okay, this is bad. And I'm trying to calm down, and I finally do, and Rand actually stayed with me, and he like held onto my ankle. It's like, I'm going in and out. I'm going in and out of the machine. Because my husband is a long-suffering and wonderful man. But you get to wear headphones inside the machine, and they had it turned to NPR, and it was Rick Steves' show. But the part that I love, and the reason I couldn't mention it in the book is because she actually works for Rick Steves, is I'm listening to it, and he's interviewing my cousin's girlfriend, Virginia, who I've known her for 16 years now, and she is part of the family. And so I'm listening to Rick Steves talk to my cousin, basically, and I calmed down because it was Virginia. And she's talking to him about the earthquake in Italy and, what people were doing during the earthquake, and how there were these little old ladies who were trapped in their houses, and when rescuers came to get them, the news and everyone was like, what were you doing? And these old women were like, what do you think I was doing? I was working. I was doing the laundry. I was making pasta. I was cleaning. I was folding. Just because I can't get out of my house doesn't mean you stop doing stuff. And it was this amazing like moment of resilience that Virginia was telling Rick Steves while I'm getting an MRI for my brain tumor. And it was just like this remarkable moment. But I didn't include it in the book because I didn't want Rick Steves to see it and think, Virginia knows this woman who has dragged on me again and again.
So we've touched on this a couple times. For
Yeah.
those who don't know the story, can you talk a little bit, your brain tumor, whose name we need to...
So I named him Steve, which...
Right.
So here's the thing, I actually don't, there's this strange dichotomy because I don't actually believe in the personification of cancer. When people are like, so-and-so beat cancer, it's like, so if you die from it, did you not fight hard? Like, that's ridiculous. That's a terrible dichotomy to have, right? Cancer is cancer. It's something that happens. And so I think this idea of like, you fight cancer, you beat, no, like, I don't like those kind of narratives. And my friend Chad, who actually has brain cancer, like, was the one who kind of tuned me on to that. I was like, oh, that's a good point. He's like, because what happens when I die? I'm like, oh, sorry. Okay, so I won't do that anymore. But I did notice that it's very difficult for people to come up to you and say, hey, how's the brain tumor? But it's very difficult for people to come up and say, hey, how's Steve? Because that's just your cousin who wears jorts. So there was, it did make the conversation around it a lot easier. So that was a big part, I think, of why that the kind of name took hold. But what's funny is, like, that's not how, like, Rand and I don't talk about it like that. I don't think anyone in my life does. And now it's so far in the past that people will come up and say, how's Steve? And I'm like, which one? Like, what? Steve who? Like, I know several. They're like, your brain tumor. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's something that I did. So it's interesting. But what's also lovely too is a lot of people will email me and they'll say, and it'll say in the subject line, because I get a lot of emails. It'll be in the subject line, like, I named my tumor like Bobby or whatever. So that it definitely, I'm a supporter of anything that enables people to talk about difficult things more freely. And that's definitely what naming my brain tumor Steve did.
I think that section's really interesting, and unfortunately we only have time for about 2 more questions here. So, but the brain tumor is also, even though you weren't necessarily traveling, it was kind of getting lost in a sense. Again, there's this great quote in your book: I've learned getting lost isn't the worst thing in the world. If you're trying to find yourself, it's a great place to start. And I love that. And what, for people who maybe can't travel, do you think it's possible to get lost and find yourself while standing still?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like, I feel like travel was just this tangential sort of thing that happened. And I don't think, I think that the narrative arc that I had, I think, is the narrative arc that we all have from the time you are 20 to 30. It's just what happened. It's just what happens during that unspecified time period. So I don't know that travel was necessarily a component, but I think that growth and that, like, kind of figuring yourself out can kind of happen at any point. And I also feel like I was very privileged in the fact that, like, I have a partner who is all about, about me becoming a better person. Not like something that he's not like, dude, you need to become a better person. Like, that is not something that he does, but he is, like, he's a very good person. And at some point you're like, oh, dang, I gotta up my game or I'm gonna be in purgatory and be super lonely. So, yeah, so I think that was part of it. But no, I don't, travel, definitely not a component. God, I hope not, because I'm getting really motion sickness and all of it. I'm ready to be at home for a while.
I have to interject one thing before the last question, which
Yeah.
is, I know from the book, and I know Rand would say this too, that your relationship is so great going both ways. And so you're really in it together.
I mean, yeah, he's stuck now,
Yeah.
right?
Lucky man. So what is the plan for this book moving forward? There might be some other things in the pipeline, and what are just your general plans for other projects?
My publisher asked me the same question. And apparently I gave the wrong answer. Which was nothing. But no, so we have been traveling. We've been traveling a lot, and like if you read the book, like I'm not good at it. Like I know that sounds like such a privilege. You guys, I'm so tired of traveling the world, but I'm not good at it, and I'm ready to be home. So I think we are gonna curtail the travel after. Now I have to go sell this book, so I do have to go around and sell the book and I'm going to Minneapolis. So we will be doing that, but in terms of what's next, so I've already pitched my next book sort of to my editor. Yeah. They haven't bought it, so but I will say it's kind of a human experiment, so that's all I will say. So if you look on the blog, the way in which my agent found me is I made my husband dress me for a week, and he had to pick out my outfits, which was a seriously traumatic experience for my beloved. But my editor loved that concept, so the idea of like doing a year basically of kind of a self-experimentation. It sounds bad. But yeah, so that's the plan for the next project, which I still need to iron out quite a few creases in it.
Well, we want to leave time for audience questions. Before we do that, though, I think we all want to give you a round of applause for all of those.
If you have a question, we ask that you come to the microphones on either side of the stage, and please remember to keep your question in the form of a question. Thank you.
I love that when someone stands up and they're like, I have a comment. Like, no, sit down. It's inevitably going to be racist. Hi. I heard something about you, by the way.
Oh, cool.
I bumped into a friend of yours.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you.
Okay. So
I've never met this woman before.
that was a weird preface. So I sometimes say, oh, I have a friend who travels a lot, and when she does, she goes to prisons, which I don't know if that's like a super deep cut. I haven't read the book yet. I bought it. I have it, but and I don't know if that's like a thing that you still do, but I wanted to ask. Oh, maybe not. Is this?
I just love that that's how you characterize.
Well, no, it's not the way I describe you, but I'm like, oh, and this is an interesting. I wish I had a thing that I went and did every time I traveled. And sometimes, usually it's drink wine, but that's not specific to me. And so I was wondering if you still visit prisons or jails, and if so, like why? Because I guess I know you and I love you, but I don't know why you do that.
Yeah. So I should clarify. They are now defunct. They are older prisons. So I visited the Eastern State Penitentiary, which is in Philadelphia, and I visited Kilmainham Jail in Dublin, and I find it fascinating. I think a big part of the reason why is we're let's first of all say the blanket statement that the U.S. prison system is horrifying, and we're way behind everyone else, and there is an entire generation of black men who are in prison, and that's fucked up. But that aside, I just do think that it is. I don't know. I think it's a fascinating aspect of like a society. Like it has always intrigued me, and one of the things that's always interested me. I talk about my anxiety. But I think as a society, we're talking now more and more about mental illness, and the mentally ill used to be put in prisons. they were just lumped in there like, okay, you're crazy, so you're going to jail. So I don't know. I don't know what it is about this morbid fascination. I think there's also something really beautiful about buildings in decay. Like sustained decay in buildings is remarkable. So, yeah, but the friend who goes to visit prisons is funny. Hello, my tall friend.
I'm too tall for this.
I know. That's the opposite problem that I have.
I think I can speak for a lot of people when I say there's one topic that has been noticeably absent so far tonight, and that is Jeff Goldblum. So I believe he lives in LA. I feel like he should. And if you are going to LA, I have this vision of him like just popping up during these Q&As and presenting an artisanal knot to you and, doing a song and dance. And I'm curious how you will react if and when that happens.
So fun fact, my agent actually knows Jeff Goldblum's agent. And she was able to she's like, I don't know if Jeff has seen the book, but she said, I did get the book to his agent. And the book is dedicated to him. So I do hope he sees it, but this is sort of strange and odd, so I'm gonna put it out there. I hope I never meet him. Because it can only be either that experience will be a letdown or the rest of my life will be. And so I'm sorry, baby, I'm sorry. I love you. I like how you're going gray and bearing a slight resemblance to him. It's working for me. So yeah, I hope I never meet him. I know that sounds terrible, but it can't happen. Too much love.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm just a random person in the audience. I have two questions. I'm wondering, you have a lot of characters in the book that are in your life.
Yes.
All of them, as a matter of fact. What was the story that you wrote in the book that you were most anxious about the real person reading?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Can I also put you on the spot and embarrass you for just a second? No, I can't. Okay, Cyrus is an actor, and he actually played young Steve Martin in, was it Father of the Bride?
Cheaper by
the dozen. And I love that fact because I love Steve Martin, and whenever I look at you, I think of him. And vice versa, actually. But I would say, I have not talked to my brother, Edward, about the chapter that's about him, and I am very anxious about that. Yeah, because as much as I would like to think otherwise, I care very much what my brother thinks. So we will, so that's something, I still don't know what the fallout of that will look like. And I would say I was also nervous to have my mom read it, but I knew she would forgive me because you have to. And I think what's interesting, so my dad never got to read the book, and I kind of knew that because he was getting sicker and he wasn't really in a position to read it. But I think the fun part that Rand and I have said is we're like, oh, he would have hated it. He would have hated it. But yeah, I would say right now, definitely Edward. I'm definitely worried about what Edward, kind of worried. He hates everything, though, so that's cool. That's
right,
cool.
That was the serious question.
Okay.
In the book, we've heard your mother's accent.
Yes.
Your father's accent.
Yes.
In the book, most of the conversations take place between you and Rand.
Yes.
Can we hear in your narrator's voice what a conversation between you and Rand would sound like?
So let me see if I could find one in here. So the thing is, Rand, my impression of Rand is just I decided I would just make him sound serious.
The poop chapter.
I know, I'm looking for the...
There's a poop chapter.
There is a whole poop chapter. It actually follows a pee chapter, or before that. And actually, that was a big discussion with my editor. She's like, should we separate the two chapters about bodily fluids? And I was like, why? Why would we do that? Like, separate them in your life. Oh, God, who gave me a microphone? Okay. So, let's see. Here's an exchange between me and Rand where I gave people directions that were wrong, and I was super psyched that I gave them directions, and Rand's like, what did you do? So, I can't believe I was able to help them, I said, delighted. Yeah, Rand said, somewhat skeptically. I didn't think there was a liquor store down here. Of course there is. We went there the other day to grab a soda, Pete's or whatever. Pete's? Yeah, the place on the corner with the big green sign. Wait, you mean Ralph's? Yeah, I said, the chipperness falling out of my gait. Ralph's, Pete's, whatever. The point is, it's a liquor store on 3rd. So I'd gotten the name wrong. They'd still find it. It's not a liquor store, Rand said. So that's kind of you have to do a different voice for yourself than the narrator. So I ended up being like very high pitched, and Rand became Rand is not, those of you who know Rand, like he's not super serious, but like he became, I think one of the reviews was like, described him as my sweet but serious husband, my like perpetually overworked and exhausted husband, my long-suffering and infinitely patient husband, my soon-to-be, no. But he's not that person. So that's been interesting to see, because I know him, so how I characterized him, I thought was, I assume that people know the whole piece, but if you don't know Rand, you're only getting part of it. And I didn't think about that. So, babe, you sound super stodgy. Sorry. Sorry. Actually, it's weird that you two haven't met.
So this book has to be a movie. Who is going to play Rand, and who is going to play you?
Oh, I like this question. Wow. Mel is also, I don't know, he's also an actor and portrayed, who was the musician who you portrayed a young version of? Joe Cocker in a video. It's fantastic. So, appropriate question coming from Mel. So, I think it's very difficult for me to cast Rand, but one of the people who I always mention is John Cho, who plays Sulu in the new Star Trek movies, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is a lot of roles that were originally intended for Asian men or men of color go to white guys, so I feel like we needed to fix that. And the second is that if you see, like, he also has this way of being, like, completely fed up. Like, if you've seen Harold and Kumar, like, he's like, oh, God. Like, he's just at the mercy of this unhinged stoner. And... Mama, I'm sorry. So he's definitely on the short list, and I also really like Zachary Quinto because I think he's handsome in the same way my husband is, and I have this long-standing crush on Lin-Manuel Miranda. So he and Rand have I actually think he and Rand look alike. Rand disagrees, and as for who would play me. I really like Gina Rodriguez because I think she's Puerto Rican, so she has she could the narrative could change slightly, but she still has kind of that knowing the immigrant family. And if you've seen Jane the Virgin, the relationship between her mother, and her grandmother, who doesn't speak English on the show, that feels so. My mother is not Xiomara, but that feels like my relationship with them a lot. Yes, I really like Gina Rodriguez. And Rand thinks she's cute, so I feel so that could work. That could work. Yeah.
I've just been signaled we have time for one more question.
Okay. Hello, person who makes an appearance in my book.
I know, twice in the same chapter.
Twice.
And you didn't call me ass face once.
Nope. That's our
Disappointing.
special nickname.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to try to stay focused on a question and not just make horrible comments to you. When you were doing the audio book,
Yes.
I know as a writer, you pore over sentences over and over and over again, but
Yeah.
when you were doing the audiobook, was there ever a moment where you were like, shit, that sentence could have been so much better? Just kind of in general, because that's the kind of thing that I could see happening. I'll sit down.
Parenthetically, very quickly, Philip was actually part of one of my favorite moments at Cranium, so we used to work together, and he owed me $2, I think because I bought him a coffee or something, and he came running back to me, and he threw, I was sitting at my computer trying to look professional because I'm in my mid-20s but have a job that I'm not qualified for, and so I was typing, and Philip comes running and throws $2 at me and screamed, "Here's your money now, where's my cat?" And yes, that was one of my favorite Cranium moments. But yeah, so one of the things that I did, and actually my friend Pam, who was here, recommended I do this, was read everything out loud while you're writing it. This book is 260 pages, and I read it all out loud before I sent it off to my editor. So for the most part, I was super comfortable with what it was. There's actually one or two lines that I would still change, because oh God, you end up having such a relationship with every damn line. So there's one or two that I would change, but what I did find during reading the audiobook is I had close to one of the final versions of the book, and I still was finding typos. And part of that is, we were copy editors, so that's what we did, so that's what we look out for. But that was something that I was and I managed to get those edits to my editor before it went to press. But we caught 3 or 4 typos, so that was kind of a big deal. But there are definitely lines that you don't realize you will have to say out loud. So you think you're super clever when you're I'm going to use alliteration, and then you have to say it out loud, and you're that was a really dumb idea. So, yeah.
Well, Geraldine, you make us laugh, you make us think, you make all of us better people.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for sharing yourself in this book.
Deanna, thank you. Thank you for being part of it.
Geraldine, she will be here to sign books, to answer all your other little questions.